Welcome to season 2 of the Happy Sensory Corner podcast. At Mendability, we want to help everyone, especially when they are vulnerable, to feel happier, more comfortable in their own skin, and more confident so that they can be their true selves and we can all journey together through life more happily. Our contribution is to work on brain health. And as our brains grow stronger and healthier, I think all of us can benefit, but especially those among us who struggle to sleep, who are overwhelmed by the barrage of information from the environment, who struggle with their bodies, with abstractions. And so we developed a program that boosts brain development, activates the brain self-healing mechanisms. It's short, hands-on games based on the science of environmental enrichment, and we call it sensory enrichment. And so we're experts in boosting brain development, but we're not experts in everything. For example, we're not experts in what you eat, physical activity, advocacy, education, job training. But today I'm excited to thrill. I'm thrilled to introduce today's guest, Anneke Elmhirst, because Anneke works with adults and their relationships. So Anneke is a relationship coach specializing in neurodiversity. With a background as a behavior analyst, she now dedicates her work to helping individuals and parents navigate the complexities of adult neurodivergent neuro it's almost a mouthful, isn't it? Neurodivergent life. Did I say that right, Anneke?
Yep, I think you got it.
Sorry, I'll take the frog out of my mouth and we can start our episodes. We're also here with Claudie Pomares. She's the creator of sensory enrichment therapy. She's our chief science officer and brain development expert at Mendability. And for those of you who pay attention, I have the same last name, and that's because she's my mom. Hi, Mom.
Hello, son.
So, Anneke, I can't wait to get into. Um, we've never had an episode about adults and relationships and what that looks like in a world where all sorts of things can happen and all sorts of people want to be happy together. And not everybody fits that perfect, neat little square box that has been built over the last 200 years with romanticism. And this is kind of how I want to introduce it, set the tone for this episode. But before we go into that, your journey is really quite interesting. Can you give us a sense of what led you to transition from a behavior analyst to a relationship coach?
I think it's really important to start what led me to becoming a behavior analyst in the first place.
Love it.
I took a class in my first year of undergraduate on child language acquisition, and autism was brought up as something that can potentially affect language acquisition. And I was instantly hooked. There was something about everything that I was reading that resonated with me so strongly that I knew that I called my mother crying because I knew what I wanted to do with my life. Um, and it was a while until I realized that I was probably seeing myself in a lot of those like diagnostic criteria that I was reading about. So I investigated. Behavior analysis came up as a potential career path. And so I went headfirst into behavior analysis. Um, in my master's program, we were taught that behavior analysis is a series of principles for understanding behavior, for examining it and picking it apart and figuring out the whys underneath behavior. When I got out into the real world, I discovered that people were using behavior analysis not as a tool to foster understanding, but to impose conformity on people with autism. Like specifically, it's seen as an autism therapy. And I'm using, for those of you who are just listening, I'm using those words in velociraptor air quotes because It's not. It shouldn't be viewed as such. It is, in my personal opinion, if it were practiced in the most ethically valid way possible, it might have a place in our current mental health system as it stands. I couldn't support that system anymore, not the way that I was seeing it, and not the way that it was being practiced by the people that I was working with or that I was supervising. I eventually realized that I couldn't change the system from inside, and I went, okay, well, what can I do? What where could I move to actually generate positive change in people who want to foster self-acceptance and who want to carve out their own place in society rather than forming themselves into these tight little packages according to what society says they ought to be. I found coaching. I'm currently working on my certification through the Coactive Training Institute, which is accredited under the International Coaching Federation, or ICF. Because, as you might have guessed from my spiel, ethics and standards are incredibly important to me. And it's part of what I believe is wrong with ABA as it's practiced right now is a lack of ethics.
So you mentioned ethical concerns with not ABA, but how ABA is being implemented. Is that right? Can you give us, is there a specific experience that would help and explain how you see the problems?
So when I first learned about the pushback against ABA, I was working in a residential facility for kids with really severe support needs. I was working in a residence with 8 kids aged 12 to 21. And initially, I dismissed a lot of the concerns that I read because they did not apply to my work at all. This was an ABA-based facility, and the criticisms of ABA were things like, well, they target insignificant behaviors like stimming. And my response was defensive. My response was, well, my job doesn't do that. We're focused on keeping kids safe. We're not at all worried about them looking neurotypical. Again, with the velociraptor air quotes here. We're we're just focusing on safety and giving them maximal independence. Um, so that was that was sort of my standard for how I believed ABA should be practiced in terms of ethics. We only were targeting behaviors that were actually dangerous. We we dealt with on the daily with severe self-injury and aggression, etc. And we were always working to find the most compassionate yet scientifically based method to reduce those behaviors. And I thought ABA must be it. And then I moved out of the residential facility and into home services, into clinic settings. I moved from Massachusetts to Pennsylvania, and I was kind of horrified by what a lot of the people around me were saying. They're saying, like, how do I get this? How do I get my client to engage in um, age appropriate recreational skills? And I'm like, I'm sitting over here looking really confused. Like, I I am an adult. I am in my 30s and I watch anime. Is that not an appropriate recreational skill for someone my age? Um, why are we so concerned with getting this child to stop doing something that brings them joy? Why is this even on the table? Why has this been mentioned in front of me? I took every instance like that so personally, and they just kept happening and kept happening. I can't point to a single person that was the problem because it was everywhere. And I don't know whether that was lack of training. I mean, behavior analysts do have ethical standards, they do have an ethical code, but it's sort of the Wild West out there. Every behavior analyst, every agency is kind of on their own in terms of how they're applying those standards.
Mm. I think just what I feel and that resonates with me in what you're saying is that the professionals have a good training, they had a code, but I feel the families are weighing heavily. You talk about stimming, that is a sign that this person is not like everybody in the group, and we need to hide that. And so is it a society issue? Is it a lack of information of the parents who are asking something that's not in the best interest of the child, but they don't know it?
I saw it on both sides, honestly. I saw behavior analysts or behavior specialists in Pennsylvania. There's a subcategory. Um, I saw them telling families, well, these are the things that we need to change. And I saw families saying, well, these are the things that we need to work on. And um, I always tried to educate families, like let's take stimming, for example. I would be like, these are the mental benefits of stimming. This is what a stim might mean in any particular context. This and some families were really open to it, and some families were not. Some families' take was, it is different. That is going to make my child's life harder. I want it to stop. And there was a limit to how much I could push back on that without getting fired, even though what I wanted to say was, what's going to make your child's life harder is not the fact that they are doing this behavior. It is the fact that you are telling them that that behavior is wrong. It's and it's really difficult. It was hard for me to walk that line. And eventually I couldn't do it anymore between the system and the insurance companies and just everything that was mixed up together. I decided I want to be in a position where I can take on clients who want my help, who want to change. One of the big issues with behavior analysis is a lack of assent from underage patients.
Um,
Mhm.
I, I I imagine we've got a mix of listeners, and I think the people who've been listening to us are pretty much on the same page about prioritizing how to help uh, everybody feel comfortable everywhere. And there's some give and take with that. There's changing the environment so that the person is more comfortable within it. And then there's increasing the ability of the person to adapt and to be resilient. And so I'm wondering, you said parents said this behavior is going to make my life's child more difficult because it's different. And I can hear some parents say yes, because the world is not ready to make somebody who stims like that not feel ridiculed, you know? And so rather than try and change the system, if there's a way to change my kid, then that's a practical approach. I I I'm not playing devil's advocate, I'm playing parents advocate.
Mhm.
And I know that there's some issues with that, and there's some long-term ramifications of that type of behavior. And when you and I had an initial conversation about this, we talked about the long-term impact, on self-esteem, on a child who wants to be loved and respected, who doesn't necessarily understand why some things are the way they are. So can you talk a little bit, what are the education pieces how would you train a parent to say, I understand this is you want your kid to be happy, I can see that. Let me tell you maybe a better way for the long term.
I think a really big part of that is first parent education. And we tend to not go far enough with parent education. We tend to stop at this is the diagnosis, these are the symptoms, done. And that's not sufficient. Um, I the example I was talking about, I'm gonna continue coming back to stimming because it's a
Yeah.
really easy one for me to formulate around. Sending them I would send families, personal accounts of adults with autism talking about the benefits of their stim as a calming mechanism for them, or just as an expression of happiness. Um, because it serves many purposes. A stim even for one person doesn't just mean one thing, right? Um, and once we've gotten the education piece down, once we've gotten the actual in-depth psychoeducation, I think the
So do you
really
think
important next. Mhm.
it sounds like you're trying to destigmatize stimming a little bit? So, hey, stimming, I know on the surface it looks weird and strange, but think about it a minute. And then you give some arguments and um how do you get the parents to then fully accept what's the next step after that? Because I think some parents will have heard, oh yes, it's good for him. There may be other ways for him to express happiness or to calm himself. It's we still, what's the next step after understanding the benefits?
I think in terms of my work as a coach, my work, if I'm working with a parent, I'm not thinking about, well, I'm thinking about their kid, obviously, but my focus is that parent. And so my question to them is going to be, who do you want to be to your child? How do you want your child to feel about you? How do you want to relate to your child? I don't think there's okay, there are parents out there who are going to say, I want my child to be afraid of me. And I would say, I can't agree with that. I can't abide that. But I think most parents are going to say, I want there to be love. I want there to be understanding. I want them to listen to me. And what I would say to that is, then you have to listen to them. They are, all behavior is communication. They are telling you something when they are doing this behavior, and you are rejecting something that you are hearing. What are you rejecting? What are you afraid of? And oftentimes it's going to boil down to, I am afraid of my child getting hurt. Um, but I think oftentimes in that case, you need to give the world a chance. I don't think, and I say this as a neurodivergent person as well as a coach here, I don't think the world is always as cruel as we expect it to be when we're discussing neurodivergence. It's bad. It's not, society ain't great the way it's set up currently. Um, but I have seen so many of my like really young clients, like preschoolers, elementary schoolers, who by no means appear neurotypical, who are like the most popular kid in their class. They are fully accepted by their peers because all of the adults in the environment have taught their peers, this is how this kid is. We are not judging this kid for that, because kids pick up on the adults. And so if you get the adults in the environment to be accepting and to be open-minded, the kids will follow suit. I've seen an amazing trend just over the past couple of decades in the school systems. I Kids aren't as mean as they used to be. And I think that as a society, I don't think we're as mean as we used to be.
So you work with adults now, neuro diverse adults.
Mhm.
Um, do you have stories of adults who share with you, who open up about their experience as children in both types of environments, maybe authoritative environments where they were told to stop stimming, and in some environments where they where adults were more accepting. What have Can you contrast the two and how they feel as adults as a result?
In terms of my clients, I'm trying to think of a client that has that duality. Um,
Or maybe two stories, from one adult who grew up in an environment and another adult who grew up in a different environment. How do they talk about their childhood, and what kind of self-esteem issues are they dealing with when they work with you?
I think that the general I can speak to the general pattern that I've seen, and your mileage may vary. No generalization is going to cover everyone, which is a generalization itself. Anyway, um, the thing that I've seen most often is people who were taught to suppress their neurodivergence in some way become very disattuned to their own needs emotionally, physically, all that jazz. They become very out of sync with themselves as humans. Whereas people who grow up in more accepting environments, I'm thinking of actually one of my partners specifically and his wife each grew up in very separate, very different households in that regard, and it's mirrored in their approach to life and their approach to each other, themselves, and other people. When you give a child a space to be accepted, they grow and they flourish in truly amazing ways. When you ask a child or demand of a child that they suppress, it creates this, I mean, it creates trauma. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Um, but the divide that it creates, it slows down their development in a lot of ways, and specifically their ability to self-regulate, their ability to self-manage. Even when I was working as a behavior analyst, the families that were really accepting of their kiddos, and they had me in to like, because they wanted me to help their kids. It was very different. Those kids were always much more open, much more willing to talk to me, much more involved in the family than the parents who wanted me in to change their kids. Those kids tended to be very closed off. They didn't want to talk to me. I was just another adult that was trying to tell them what to do. I could generally win them over by talking about like Minecraft and whatnot. I sort of I had my ways of bridging the generational divide there, but it is like the most convincing thing I can say is it's unhealthy to to block your child off from any space where they can just exist without having to self-monitor and self-correct all the time.
I want to share here because it happened this morning where I was talking with a mom. Um, you are working with people who are verbal, so even if they don't communicate well, they can at least put words into things. And the mom I was talking with this morning, we're doing mendability with her boy. He's nonverbal. He's about 12, and his way of finding some kind of well-being when he was anxious was to be on an iPad. And that is something that a lot of parents are worried about and talk about. And there was, as long as the school and the professionals or the parents were trying to remove this object so that he could focus on something else, there is always a good intent. He was extremely aggressive. He was uh, unable to even stay sitting on one place, even with the iPad, always moving, running around, or escaping every authority that was coming his way. So when we started Mendability, we do the educational part where we explain to the parents, okay, this is a serotonin problem. He does not produce enough in his brain. And so anything that is a small stressor is going to bring him way higher in anxiety than it would for you. So whatever he finds to process or to endure is a good thing. So we are definitely on the same page as we talk about it on the neurological, neurobiological dimension, but we are discussing the same situation. So as soon as mom started to allow him to be anxious, she had to herself accept the fact that the world was not pleasant to this kid. And we did all kinds of therapeutic exercises, and we did orchestral music. We did a lot of soft touch and massage. So he became less anxious, and his relation to the object changed. And this morning, she told me that spontaneously, without anybody asking, when it's time to go to bed, he brings his iPad to mom. Because forever, for the last 10 years probably, or 9 years, she told him no iPad into the bedroom. And there was a crisis, and there were meltdowns and self-harm. And now we moved to a place where he can do the parents' rule because they are respectful of him, and also his brain is doing a better job. And he goes on long trips with dad. Dad is a trucker, hard worker, and the kid would be for hours on the iPad. But then he would not look at the road. He would not have a physical nice cuddle with dad. Now he brings the iPad, puts it on the table before they leave the house. And out of all the things that mom was telling me today about how much better he's doing, this was the most important because he was able to understand why do the environment feel, okay, the iPad is not always the best thing, and being able to feel the emotion of others. So that's a huge thing. And now he's no longer upset or sad. It just is willing to sort of part and because he's receiving. And I think maybe that's the thing that you're mentioning with the uh, parents being ruling is they're not giving something when they take away or when they try to take away. So maybe as far as we're concerned with mendability and helping the kids' anxiety decreasing the cortisol levels by smelling something that smells lovely or having a nice foot massage, uh, the giving that is also therapeutic, in fact, but that there is an exchange. What do you think?
I think that's so true. I love that example because it shows something that people don't really believe until it's been demonstrated to them, which is that kids self-regulate a lot more than we give them credit for. He as you've described, he was self-regulating with the iPad. He was trying his darndest to self-regulate with the iPad, and it wasn't working. And now he can regulate and engage more
Mm-hmm.
since his other concerns have been addressed. I love that so much. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly what I'm talking about in that like parents need to provide a space for their child just to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we sometimes I tell parents, uh, is somebody gonna die? Is the house gonna fall up? Okay, good. Why worry about it?
I'd like, uh, I wanted to talk about respect a little bit, but I feel like maybe we've addressed it. Maybe let me ask you one more question. What does respect look like in practice for neurodivergent children? And initially, when I wrote this question, I was thinking, how do parents show respect to the neurodivergent divergent children? But I'm wondering if both you, Claudie, and you, Anneke, have some insights on how do neurodivergent children show respect to their parents? And I want to see show parents that there's lots of clues that the children are giving them that they do respect and they want to have a healthy relationship. I don't know who wants to go first.
Annika is a guest. She has the floor.
Oh, well, I think as you're implying, respect does go both ways. I think you can't give respect to someone who doesn't respect you. And so parents, as the adults in the situation, need to be the ones to start fostering that connection and that respect. Um, in terms of what it looks like towards neurodivergent kids, I
No,
think a lot of
from
that is
from
hmm,
ni from
from
neurodivergent kids.
okay.
Like for example, you say you feel like you belong in that group. Do you remember do you have memories of you trying to communicate respect to your parents and they weren't picking up on it? And you're saying, "No, I am being respectful." You just don't
I
see it.
was
Have you had moments like that?
I was a very anxious and rule-based child. So I'm not going to say I was never a problem because I absolutely was occasionally um, troublesome as all children must be. A convenient child is not a healthy child. Um, but I think that neurodivergent kids understand respect in the same in a lot the same way that they understand empathy. It's very personalized. So one kid might listen to everything that adults tell them to do. First time, absolutely. They're anxious. It's their way of doing things. And that might be them demonstrating respect. And I think it's important to give credit to that. For another kid, their respect might be in displays of affection. It might not look the way that we necessarily want our respect to look. It might not look like hopping to at the second a parent tells them to do something. It might be that I personally am of the opinion that kids desperately want to respect their parents. And they need appropriate boundaries to do that. And when I say appropriate boundaries, I mean not too strict and not too loose. Um,
I think
so,
we can do a few hours of talking about what is not too strict and not too
oh
loose.
yeah,
You just dropped the bombshell there.
sorry,
Uh-huh.
that's wildly variable depending on your
Yeah.
situation. But I worked with a lot of kids who I was teaching them to, when their parents said something, not to instantly do what their parents said, because that is, quite frankly, unreasonable. I don't drop everything that I'm doing the second my mother texts me. Like, that's
Well,
not,
well,
oh,
if
okay,
I'm
okay,
sure
fair
if I
enough.
say something,
They're
Kim is
there,
going to
Anneke.
obey.
They're there.
Oh, I opened that can of worms. Um, but I taught them that if they responded in a with a respectful explanation, they got a lot more leeway. And that part of that was also training the parents to not expect perfect, rigid obedience every time. If your 12-year-old is in the middle of playing a video game and you say, take out the trash, I think it's perfectly reasonable for them to say, I will take out the trash as soon as I finish this level, I promise. I I think that's reasonable. As a parent, you might not. I'm not gonna I reasonable is subjective. But that is, I think, the respect that a lot of neurodivergent kids give is honesty, is explanation. And in our world of weird little social niceties, it's often interpreted as blunt and rude, and that's not how they mean it. That's not how they mean it at all. Most of a lot of, I not most, but a lot of my job as behavior analyst, I played interpreter between parent and kid. The kid would tell me something and I'd tell the parent, okay, this is what he's saying, this is what it means. Parent would say something, I'd tell the kid, this is what they're saying, this is what it means. And it was a lot easier to do the kids' way because they were saying exactly what they meant. They just weren't decorating it in the sideways social niceties that we often have to learn as adults.
Mhm. But
Really? Have
again, I'm
you
thinking of
oh,
our little kids who are nonverbal. Ha they can show it totally as well. And I'm thinking, as we were talking about stimming, and sometimes it needs to be interrupted. So I remember a scene where I was doing a live session with parents, and as I was talking with the parents, the kid in the other side of the room was twirling. He was really good at twirling things, but he discovered he could do that with an extension cord that was not a small one. And so I could imagine that's going to end up poorly. And the dad so wanted to say stop. And it would have been reasonable, like
Mm-hmm.
bio standard, because life was at stake here almost. And so I told the dad, okay, go to him, tell him that he twirls so wonderfully well. But if he was using that flamingo, that was a stuffed toy, that would make a different noise. It would really look cute. So he gave a big flamenco, and the kids started to twirl. The dad said, oh, yeah, that's great. You do it so well. And as we were talking, the kid abandoned the flamenco. I could still see the kid say, okay, is he going to go back to the fun extension cord? And the kid looked around, looked at his dad, and picked up a pillow and started to. And for me, that was a demonstration of respect. Like he understood, okay, that thing, he does not like it. And he's 3.5. He doesn't know why the dad doesn't like it, but the way dad explained that it was beautiful, but that what would make us such a beautiful sound. Uh, there was a transaction. There was giving and taking, and I believe that little kid showed respect. Do you agree, or do you think I'm wrong there? And
No, absolutely. Absolutely, I agree. I love that. I think that teaching kids that giving kids options, giving kids um alternatives and validating what they're doing is respect. And I think that was a perfect example of that dad gave that kid respect. You want to twirl something? I am going to show you what is safe to twirl. And the kid responded with going, I will then twirl the safe thing for you.
mm,
I it absolutely warms my heart to hear that sort of thing because we don't need to stop. Like obviously there's some behaviors that are dangerous and they need to stop in their tracks, but I find that even really young kids can be taught the concept of danger, and if we work with them rather than dictating to them, we can find alternatives to the things that are dangerous. If a kid really is climbing on windowsills because they want to see outside, teach them to say, I want up, and pick them up so that they can see out the window. It feels a little transactional sometimes to say you need to give respect to get respect, but I think
well,
it's true.
yeah, I think that's true for all of us, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
it's funny when you said the kid wants to climb on a windowsill to see. I was thinking, well, just put a railing and he can go up anytime he wants, and you know you will be safe. But I love your suggestion of turning into a moment between child and parent, and how much more does the child will enjoy looking outside if he can share that experience, and the oxytocin and the serotonin and the dopamine and all the good stuff that's going to happen. um I thank you for teaching us.
Of course. I love this stuff. It's why I tried to stick with behavior analysis for so long, is that I loved being able to be creative in the solutions that I provided, but eventually there's no amount of creative single person solutions that could override a system supporting so many, quite frankly, biased service providers.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, one episode at a time. Here we are, trying to help everybody, make everybody feel comfortable. Thank you so much, Anneke, for being part of our journey. Um, in the show notes, you will know how to get hold, and maybe if you want Anneke to do some coaching with you, what's the best way to reach you, Anneke?
My website is just my name, Anneke-Elmhirst, Anneke dash Elmhirst, and I'm on Instagram as All for Love Coaching.
All for Love Coaching. Awesome. Everybody, have a good week.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Thank you.